What is up, guys? Coach Josiah here, AnastasiFitness.com. Today we are going to answer the question, what exercises should I do at the gym? Unfortunately, there's a lot of bad exercises promoted nowadays because of people trying to get views on social media. But by the end of the video, you'll know which exercises to actually focus on and the top exercises I've used throughout my training career to transform my body. Let's go. Okay, exercise number 1 is the incline barbell press. Over the years, I've always prioritized upper chest movements because this is what gives your chest the fully rounded look from top to bottom. And without building the upper portion, your chest will never really look fully developed. Maybe asking why I didn't choose dumbbells for this, and the reason for that is by using a barbell, it's a lot easier for me to load the chest with a lot more weight compared to using dumbbells. As I've gotten stronger, it's becoming a lot harder to get heavy dumbbells up and really stabilize myself during the movement. But when I use a barbell, it locks me into place and allows me to solely focus on my chest during the exercise instead of worrying about having to stabilize the dumbbells. The 6 to 8 rep range is my favorite range to train in for this exercise. Anytime I go higher in reps, a lot of the times I find my shoulders start burning out before my chest does. So keep that in mind when you do this exercise or any chest movements in general. You want your chest to be the limiting factor, nothing else. All right, exercise number 2 is the dumbbell row. The dumbbell row is hands down my favorite exercise to target my entire back because it doesn't just target the muscles that contribute to back thickness, but it also hits the lats pretty good as well. And you aren't able to target both aspects of your back as good with vertical pulling exercises like a lat pull down, which makes dumbbell rows really efficient. And the reason I like using dumbbells as opposed to a barbell is I'm able to stabilize on the bench and get a really good stretch at the bottom without my lower back being the limiting factor. Don't get me wrong, I still use barbell rows in my routine sparingly, but a limiting factor with this exercise is that as you get stronger and start using heavier weights, it gets a lot harder to stabilize yourself in the bent over position throughout an entire set. But when I use a dumbbell, I'm able to stabilize myself onto the bench and finish my sets off strong without my lower back being the reason I stop the set. As for the preferred rep range for dumbbell rows, I stick between 8 and 10 reps. Since it's a single arm exercise, I find doing anything higher than this takes too much time and I start losing focus towards the end of a set. One more thing I will say is you shouldn't avoid a conventional barbell row because it's still a great exercise. And when you hold that bent over position, it does train muscles in your back that stabilize, and this is still something you want to train. Programs I make for myself just usually target these muscles with different exercises, so keep that in mind. Okay, exercise number 3 is the wide grip lat pull down. The wide grip pull down is the number 1 exercise that's contributed to growing my lats. The reason I love it is when I resist the weight on the way up, it gives me a better pump in my lats than any other exercise. If I try to do this with, let's say, pull-ups, I've never been able to get the same mind muscle connection or pump as I could with lat pull-downs. When I design a program, I usually will have lat pull-downs 2 times per week using the 10 to 12 rep range. And if I ever do pull-ups, they are generally used in my programs for building strength in the 4 to 6 rep range. In terms of how wide of a grip you should use for these exercises, everyone is going to be really different. But what I found best for most of my clients is to start at 1.5 times shoulder width and adjust from there. All right, moving into exercise number 4, the traditional dumbbell curl. I've tried a lot of different variations of curls throughout my career, and dumbbell curls have always stood out to me in terms of being able to connect to my biceps. A lot of people prefer using a barbell, and what I found over the years is anytime I use a barbell, a lot of the tension is placed on my forearms and wrists instead of my biceps. But the moment I switch over to dumbbells, all of the tension and focus transfers over to my biceps. Be aware of this anytime you are doing curls. If your wrists or forearms are causing you to stop a set, make some adjustments and make sure your biceps are the limiting factor. As for the rep range, I usually do between 10 and 20 reps. For me, curls have always been better using a higher rep range along with progressing in reps as opposed to weight. Don't get me wrong, I still progress in weight, but I prioritize progressing in a decent amount of reps first before moving up in weight. Okay, exercise number 5 is the seated triceps overhead extension. Anytime you train your triceps, you want to include an exercise that places your arms overhead because this allows you to target all functions that your triceps have. Each area of your triceps extends the elbow, but the long head also assists in bringing your arm overhead, and that's why this is my go-to exercise for the triceps. When your arms are overhead, it also allows for a huge stretch, and getting a big stretch on the target muscle is what we're shooting for on most exercises. And the reason I'm doing this seated is I'm able to use a lot more weight and focus all my attention on my triceps, compared to standing where a lot of energy goes to stabilizing your core and body in that position. I generally train my triceps in the 10 to 20 rep range, and the reason for this is a lot of my pressing movements are in the 6 to 8 range. So anytime I train my chest chest or shoulders, my triceps are getting a good amount of work in those lower rep ranges. All right, moving into exercise number 6, the barbell overhead press. This exercise is one of the most functional and applicable exercises to everyday life. The barbell overhead press is probably my favorite exercise to train my shoulders, and I do this standing because the carryover to everyday life is huge. The reason this is one of the most functional movements at the gym is to think about in life how at times you reach overhead to grab something or you need to put something away that's decently heavy. This exercise is really applicable to those situations along with a lot of other things you do in everyday life. Now compare this to a bench press. When do you ever lay on your back and push something above you? Probably never. People often get caught up in isolating each muscle when they train, and don't get me wrong, this is needed to maximize growth. But for me personally, I like to include exercises like the overhead press that carries over to everyday life. I usually stick to the 4 to 8 rep range for this exercise, primarily focusing on building strength and adding weight to the bar as opposed to reps. Okay, exercise number 7 is the barbell squat. I'm sure you knew this exercise was coming, and for good reason. This is the one movement I generally never swap out of my routine because of how effective it's been for me. Oftentimes people don't like squatting because it feels really damn uncomfortable for them, and this is usually due to lack of mobility in the ankles or calves. When your ankles are tight, it doesn't allow you to fully sit down into a squat, and if you do try, it will feel uncomfortable and leave a lot of muscles in your lower body in pain or just tight in general. So if you do feel uncomfortable squatting, make sure you are doing a decent amount of stretching for your ankles and calves beforehand. One thing I've learned throughout my training career is going over 12 reps on squats is generally a bit too taxing on my cardio system, meaning after 12 reps, I usually don't stop my set because of my legs failing. I stop because I'm so out of breath. And I have pretty good cardio. I run every single day, but this exercise just hits your cardio system really damn hard when you do a lot of reps. With that being said, I keep my reps between 6 to 10 while focusing on building strength and adding weight to the bar as opposed to doing more reps. All right, exercise number 8 is the deadlift. I attribute a lot of the growth on my hamstrings, glutes, and back purely from deadlifts. I highly recommend doing this exercise at least once per week, especially if you are a beginner, because deadlifts are one of the best exercises to build foundational strength, which can carry over to other exercises you do at the gym, which is going to pay off big time in the long run. This is because you generally won't be able to lift more weight with any other exercise, meaning there is a lot of potential for increasing strength as you add weight to the bar. As for the rep range I use, my favorite is hands down the 4 to 6, while primarily focusing on building strength. There are 2 reasons for this. Number 1 is this allows you to focus on building strength, which deadlifts are great for. And number 2, I found it that it is really hard to maintain good technique throughout an entire set while using a higher rep range. Because the exercise is really difficult to perform, and in those longer sets, it's easy to lose focus towards the end because of overall fatigue. And deadlifts can be really dangerous if your form starts to break down, so I recommend using a rep range that allows you to maintain strict form and technique the entire set. Okay, moving into exercise number 9, the barbell Romanian deadlift. What I love most about the Romanian deadlift is you're hitting 3 muscle groups really hard with one movement: your glutes, hamstrings, and back. It not only hits each of these muscle groups really damn hard, but it also has a huge potential for building a lot of strength. Just like the traditional deadlift, you'll be able to use a lot of weight, which is going to result in more strength gains and muscle growth. One thing to be aware of for this exercise is eventually your grip will be a limiting factor, so if you find your grip is failing before the target muscles, invest in some lifting straps or use an over-under grip. And the reason I don't prefer dumbbells for this exercise is the limitations dumbbells have in terms of how much weight you can use. It's a lot easier to hold 200 pounds on the bar as opposed to holding 100-pound dumbbells in each hand. As for my preferred rep range, I like to keep things heavy in the 6 to 8 range. Anytime I do 10 plus reps, my lower back is usually the limiting factor, which doesn't allow me to hit my glutes and hamstrings as hard as I'd like. All right, that's it for the video today, guys. Hope it helped. If you liked today's video, subscribe to the channel. We'll be dropping plenty more videos just like this. Also, if you're trying to get lean this summer, check out my most recent video. I talk about the biggest tips and tricks I use on my clients and myself anytime we're going through a cutting phase. Thanks again for watching, guys, and I'll talk to you soon. Let's go.